A psychologist walked into a school room, and they were working on stress management. And she had in her hand a glass of water. And of course, the students thought, it's the old question, is it half full or half empty? But that wasn't what she asked. Instead, she said, how heavy is this glass? And of course, there were all kinds of responses. 20 ounces, 18 ounces, whatever. And she goes, no, the weight is not that important. Oh, by the way, I did weigh this. It's 25 ounces altogether. But anyhow, that isn't the important thing. What she said is, it doesn't matter how the weight, but how long you hold it. If I hold this glass for a minute, no problem at all. If I were to hold this glass for an hour, my arm would start to get achy. If I were to hold this glass for a whole day, whoa, that's what would happen. I would get paralyzed. I would lose control. It would not be a good thing. And it would be incredibly uncomfortable. So she said, stress and worry is a lot like holding this glass. If you hold it for a little bit, no big deal. But if you hold it for a longer period of time, it starts getting really heavy. And if you hold it all day, it really will cause you serious problems. And so she said, so it'd be wise to set your glass down. So I was thinking about that example this week, and I thought, are there some things right now that you would benefit from setting down, like the glass of water here? And so when I was interacting with people this week and talking with them, I shared that question occasionally, and I just observed some of the what was going on for people. And one of the gals I talked to said that she was currently experiencing, which said, I can't describe it any other way except survivor guilt. She said, because I know that the current pandemic and how it's impacting people's lives, and some people are gravely impacted. And she said, and I'm not. She said, my life is really quite good. And she said, so I'm feeling kind of badly about that. And, watching other people have it so much worse. And so we talked about that, because the reality is, if you talk to those people who are having a challenging time, for one, is they would not wish that on anyone else. So they would be happy for you that you aren't experiencing what they're experiencing. Also, it doesn't serve them in any way whatsoever. In fact, if we move into that place of being grateful for what we have, it actually creates an energy which benefits much more than if we were to go into a sympathetic type vibration. And so it reminded me this week to be grateful for the abundance that is in my life right now. Then I kept asking that same question, what is it that you'd like to set down right now? And for some people, it became evident that they wanted to set down some of their disappointments. For example, my grandson, who is a very proud fifth grader, would be graduating from the fifth grade because they move into a new building and they make a big deal out of it and they have a graduation, and he'd then go and start next fall at a new school. And he's been looking forward to this graduation, I think, since last September. And it's not going to happen. We've got hundreds of thousands of high school students who are not going to have a traditional high school graduation. We have college students who have worked so hard and are not going to walk across a stage in a traditional way for graduation. Disappointment, yeah, very real. There are people that are more serious disappointments because they no longer have the work that they were doing 2 months ago. There are people that have had deaths of loved ones that they weren't allowed to grieve in a traditional way, whether it was from the COVID virus or something else. And it doesn't seem to matter, the disappointments are relative for each individual. My granddaughter just had a birthday this week, and at 9 years old, you want to have a birthday party and have all your friends come. And that couldn't happen. So, those disappointments are real, but at some point, if we hang on to them, they're going to weigh us down. We need to set them down. I was talking to some people about expectations that they're having that they wanted to let go of for a while. And that was, one supermom who is working from home, trying to provide 3 meals a day and be a teaching assistant to her kids are home doing classwork. And then since she's home, she should be able to keep the house, can you hear all these expectations? Because what tends to happen is if you had a lot of expectations before this, and now you're sequestered or whatever might be different for you right now, you didn't just let go of all expectations. You just maybe made some new ones. And it's like, well, I'm home now. I should be able to, declutter the entire environment. I should be able to redo that entire garden, blah, blah, blah. You can kind of hear all these. We can set these expectations, and then we get frustrated because we don't have the energy for them. So we set them down. I like Bertrand Russell, who says, one of the symptoms of an approaching nervous breakdown is the belief that one's work is terribly important. Now, get the energy of that, because there's a big difference between thinking your work is terribly important and that you are of great value. I was watching an interview of a bus driver in New York who was talking about his awareness of his value. And he went to work with a new pride because he knew that his bus was transporting essential workers to hospitals and all around the community. And he had great pride in that. So that's very different than when we get into that energy of, I'm terribly important, or this is terribly important, and we artificially place a whole bunch of expectations we don't need. So those might want to set down a little bit. And so besides disappointments and expectations, maybe it's fear that we get to let go for a little while. I had, I'll call it an opportunity 2 weeks ago to be in an emergency room. Now, an emergency room is not my favorite place to be anytime particularly, and right now that was really a place I was looking to avoid. But circumstances and symptoms necessitated that I go to the emergency room. And like so many people, Stephen, my husband, dropped me off, and I went in by myself. And I was aware that whatever was going to transpire going forward, I would not be doing it with him by my side or people that I knew. And that was an awareness, that was not lost on me. And I continued on into the procedure. They took my blood pressure, and it was high. And I don't have high blood pressure, so I had to do a little talking to myself and tell myself, Barbara, let go of your concerns, your apprehensions. You're here. You're in the best place you should be. You are with a bunch of people who really care a lot about your health and well-being. They're here to do the very best. And so I shifted my focus from a little apprehension, not even big blown fear, but just enough apprehension that, we react, and back into the truth that I know is that I was in the perfect place at the perfect time. And I started talking with the angels that were around and the angels of all the other folks, and I had a nice conversation. And I can't say that I fell asleep in the MRI machine, but I became much more comfortable. All was well anyway. It's been 2 weeks since then. I'm great. But it reminded me of that, that was just a minor fear. And I think of the people that have to go into their jobs or whatever those might be. And it's understandable to have concern. But there will be a point where you have to let go of that and set it down, whether it's the end of the shift, the end of the day, what have you, and distract ourselves or whatever it takes so that we can come back to center. And because this is a time in history, I think, that calls for compassion, appreciation, and perhaps a different mindset than we had previously in some ways. I always think of, this week I did some pruning of the bushes in front of my house. Pruning is I butchered them. I now have big clumps of 10-inch brown twigs going it looks like some prehistoric animal out there. I did that last year too. I didn't quite prune at the right I think there's a better time you're supposed to prune before they start blooming, budding and all those kinds of things. Didn't happen again this year either. But you know what happens with plants, I've learned, is that even though I am not a wise gardener necessarily, wherever I cut them off, they create a new perfect. And last year, the bushes were beautiful. And my expectation is they will be this time too. Because no matter what happens, whatever the circumstances shift to, or whatever choices we make, we now, because we live in an abundant universe with unlimited possibilities, it's like, well, now we've changed direction. Well, now I've still got, this is the new perfect, and from here will be new unlimited possibilities to choose from, or a new optimal way of being. All of that just keeps shifting with each decision or each experience that we have. So I like the old quote that says, life isn't waiting for the storm to pass, it's learning to dance in the rain. And so I was thinking, what are some of the things that people are dancing in the rain equivalent to right now? And I was talking with a gal who said every night their entire family, their children, both parents, eat dinner together. And she says, I can't remember when we did that last, because there was always some sport event, there was overtime, the kids had part-time jobs, there was all these different things going on. And so the possibility of them all being together never happened. And she said, so that's one of the blessings of right now. She gets to spend more time with her kids. And I thought, oh, isn't that fabulous? And I saw some pictures on the internet of large cities throughout the world and the air that is so much cleaner than it was in February. And though there are dolphins, I understand, in the Venice canals, and the water is clearer. And I'm thinking, okay, these are some interesting things to notice and appreciate while we're dancing in the rain, metaphorically, while we're all in this together. It's a time where I'm reflecting on simplifying, although I thought I was pretty simple already, but I could even do more, and decluttering my mind. And I know that one of the things that I did is that when what I set down besides, the concern or fear that one day, is I set down the necessity of watching the news. And I wasn't a big news watcher previously, but once this pandemic hit, I did start watching more news and to get information. And what I found is that I had reached a certain level where I needed to stop watching it so much. Because we know that to be a witness to crisis impacts us energetically as well. And so if we're not getting as much done as you thought you were going to get done during all this extra time you have at home, well, perhaps that is because you're making the adjustment energetically to what is as well. Possibly. But while I was doing that, I became aware while I was watching, and I got very inspired, because what's happening too, one of the things, the benefits of this time, is that attention is being drawn more broadly to some of the things in society that need our attention. The homeless, food insecurity, these were already present. But now, because we're really seeing that so clearly, and we're seeing that the schools have initially had to scramble to provide the meals for the children, because so many children get 2 meals a day from their schools, that we're seeing, okay, there are some broader issues which can be addressed. Now, I might not be the person who's got the solution for that, or is in the position to change that, but I am a person who can hold that in mind, that there is a solution, and I see it happening, and I see it being tended to. And so that's one of the possibilities I love right now. It also seems to me that there's a little bit of shift, maybe even a big shift, to appreciation of workers versus perhaps the accumulation of wealth or money. That we're really seeing the value in labor, in laboring, in the gifts that each person brings. And I think that's very exciting. I've seen that people are in a hurry to get back to normal, and they meant the old normal. That's what they're talking about. And I'm with you. I could say quite honestly, in February, I loved my life. I had no complaints. And if my life had continued in that vein for months to come, even years to come, I might have said, "Ooh, pretty darn good." But the truth is, that isn't how the universe works. I love what Ernest Holmes, who's a wonderful New Thought teacher, said in Science of Mind. He said, "Change is the law of human experience, for only God is permanent. Nature will not let us stay in any one place too long. She will let us stay just long enough to gather the experience necessary to the unfolding and advancement of the soul. Nature demands the change in order that we may advance. When the change comes, we should welcome it with a smile on the lips and a song in the heart." Okay. I cannot honestly say that I had a smile on my lips and a song in my heart when these changes came. And so that might be a high bar, but that's a good bar to go for. But the one thing we want to be cautious of is not to be in resistance to change. Resistance to change, we know, does not work well. If you ever looked at stagnant water that is no longer flowing, not a lot of life going on in it. And I think of the Michael Beckwith had a wonderful little metaphor he used to use for talking about change. And he would talk about the chick in the egg. And he would say, initially when the chick's inside the egg and it's comfortable, everything is taken care of, life is good. The chick grows a little more, still pretty good. Then it starts growing and the shell gets a little tight. It's getting a little uncomfortable. The chick is continuing to grow, and now the chick is actually polluting its own environment, and it is getting pretty serious in that shell, and because we're reaching that critical point where the chick may die if something doesn't happen. And then at that point, something happens, and there is an irresistible urge by the chick to peck, and it pecks its shell, and it emerges out into a whole new world. The whole new world was there already, but the chick didn't know about it. And when we stay, I say I want things to be like they used to be, they don't stay that way. Because if they did, it would get stagnant too. And so I love what Neil Donald Walsh says about change too. He says that we have been viewing change as a disruption, a break in the flow, a shift in direction, an alteration in our lives. But change is not a disruption, but an eruption. It is life erupting into fuller bloom. I like that. Life erupting into fuller bloom. Change is not a break in the flow. Change is the flow. Change is not a shift in direction. It is the direction in which all life moves. Oh, I like that. So it's a different way of looking at change. So when we're trying to hold on and go back to what was, probably not going to happen. But the good news is we can get excited about what the new will be like. And maybe the new will be that job that you had before, but in a different way. It's even better. Or maybe the new will be in a job that you cannot even imagine. We start holding on to all those possibilities. And I find it interesting that this big change that's happening is worldwide. It's reminding us of our interconnectedness. If it had happened, 100 years ago before airplanes, it might not have happened like this because it would have had to cross continents probably by ship. Might have taken a while or never happened, don't know. But at this time, when we are actually so interconnected, but yet there is some resistance to where we want to go more into tribal or nationalistic or separation thinking, it's like the universe is reminding us unsubtly that we're all connected and that that's good news. Because when we become aware of that, we work together. We create this mass of positive love and energy, and the new perfect can be outstanding. There's a Chinese proverb says that when the winds of change blow, some people build walls and others build windmills. Well, when the winds of this change blew through, some people in Detroit build ventilators instead of automobiles. I think of when the winds of this change are blowing through right now. Some nurses and medical professionals in the Midwest drove out to New York where they could help. When the winds of change blew through here, I heard the wonderful story about a farmer and his wife, a retired Kansas farmer, who mailed a N95 surgical mask to Mario Cuomo, the governor of New York, with a wonderful little note. And it said that we have 5 of these masks because 1, we were farmers, and 2, my wife has serious lung issues, and they're both seniors. And so he said, we kept 4 for ourselves because we need those because of my wife's condition, but we have 1 that's never been used. And he mailed it to New York. When the winds of change blow through, it invites us to step forward and to build whatever that is, whether it's in our consciousness or something physically. We get to do that. I love it. I want to kind of finish off with a story I heard about a mom and her daughter, the little 3-year-old, and they were walking through the park, and Mom had purchased a helium balloon, and being very wise, she had tied it to the wrist of her daughter. But a big gust of wind came through unexpectedly. Unsettled. And the big gust of wind came through, and the balloon broke free and went up. And the mom instantaneously, she immediately tensed up because she was preparing herself for a temper tantrum she thought would follow. But instead what happened is the little girl looked up and went, wow, look. And the mom said she was just fascinated. So when the winds of change blow through, we can tense. That might be our initial reaction, it's okay. But then to move into that place of fascination and openness to seeing and experiencing something new. And when we do that together, we know that we're going to create fantastic new experiences to come. So my wish for you this week is that if you have something that's getting heavy, set it down for a little bit. You can pick it up again, but set it down for a little while to give yourself a break. And then make sure that there's no resistance to what is moving through. And then begin to use our visualizing power to create the world that we want. And that world in my mind is a world that is safe and healthy and full of happy experiences for everyone. And so it is.